In the arena tonight, a manager within West Monroe Partners in the utilities practice, he leads teams within the firm that implement large-scale technology transformations that help companies accelerate on growth and deliver on their customer promise. He also founded and oversees the firm's small minority-owned business initiative, which provides entrepreneurs of color access to professional advisory services and capital to scale their business. He also serves as advisor to the firm's executive leadership on its own firm-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. The Chicago native is also a member of New Life Covenant Southeast, a non-denominational church fostering life-changing Christian experiences through prayer, word, worship, outreach, and community development. In 2021, he was elected president of the EMMAUS Board of Directors, introduced to the organization 3 years earlier by a Christian colleague who had been supporting it. At the time, the organization was undergoing significant transition in its board and executive leadership that constrained its capacity to operate and grow. He met with members of the board and the team to help craft proposed strategies and tactics to help improve organizational resilience and enable growth. Joining me in the arena right now is the incredible, and I will say patient, Clarence Booth. How are you, brother?
I am good, glad to be here.
You've just sat through 8 takes of an introduction like no other introduction, and you have been supportive, and I think we're going to see themes tonight that is a part of who you are. But let's begin at the beginning, shall we?
Let's do that.
All right. When and where were you born?
I was born in Chicago, 82, the west side of Chicago, in the Austin community, which, as I understand it, is the largest historical neighborhood, black neighborhood in all of Chicago.
Tell me about the man and woman who created you.
Oh, goodness. How much time you got?
We got all, you just saw we got all the time we need, sir.
My mother was born and raised in Chicago. Her family hails from the South, as part of the Great Migration, as most black families did. My father was born and raised in Little Rock, Arkansas. So he had a brother, and he migrated up to Chicago for college, high school and college, actually, to live with his mother. And his father stayed down in Little Rock. They met one fateful night where, as my mother tells me, my father kept my mother out too long. And so my great-grandfather and grandmother being very old school, my grandfather said, well, if you like it, then you bought it, if you're going to keep it out this late.
Okay.
And so they
like
got married. They got married.
The original Beyonce song.
Yeah. So he liked it. I guess he wanted to put a ring on it, and here I was. So,
Okay.
and grew up mostly, my heritage is mostly the west side of Chicago.
Okay. Siblings?
I do. I have one sister, and I have 3 brothers, all of whom are spread out across the country. So as far as LA and Texas to Miami and Indianapolis. So coordinating for holidays is always quite the challenge.
Got it. So where are you at on the step of the children?
That's interesting. Historically, I've been considered the oldest because I grew up with my younger brother and sister in terms of my family of origin. My oldest brother is technically my half-brother, but you know how we do in the black family. Yeah, even your cousins are your brothers and sisters.
For real.
But he lived in Little Rock with his mother, and he would only come up maybe once a year for a holiday. And then my youngest brother I actually didn't know about until several years later.
Wow. Okay. So blended family as it was, compare and contrast for me as well as you can, as best you can, relationships growing up. What do they look like that may be similar and different to what those relationships are now?
I grew up in the 90s during the era of you know, crack cocaine being at an all-time high. And so my parents were not college educated. They had a little bit of college, but they didn't graduate. They had me, and then they immediately went into their respective careers. So early on, I was very much so a homebody. My parents had the dream of home ownership. And I think that once we finally moved from an apartment near Chinatown to our first home that I grew up in on the west side of Chicago, that was the makings of the family and the vision that I think that they saw for themselves. And so during that time, the neighborhood was still sort of forming. I mean, there was a significant amount, you know, of gang activity, drug dealing that was happening. But you know, my mother and father were unfazed as far as they were concerned. While they couldn't control anything that was happening outside of their door, they could control everything on the inside, and they could foster the kind of, you know, family dynamic that, you know, they wanted to raise their kids in and nurture their children in.
So it didn't matter where the house was, where the home
exactly.
they created mattered.
And you know, and the home that they had bought was sort of the first point of entry for home ownership for them. And so they made it work. And I say all that to say that relationship for me really just started off being insular within my family, my brother and sister, because, you know, playing on the street, you know, at certain times of the night and things of that nature just introduced too many elements to which I could get into, and my parents didn't want that for me. So they made sure that they sort of tried to foster a healthy environment internally inside the home. And then they were also very adamant about us actually doing something. And I got to credit my mother and father for constantly pushing me towards things that would sort of incite my creativity. So my mother was she was a very talented photographer. And that bled into her introducing us to the arts. So whether we were doing ceramics or whether we were making pottery or whether we were doing painting, she insisted that we do those things. My father was always, had such a big affinity for music, even though he never got to formally study it. So he bought a piano for Christmas, and I remember us opening it up and we were like, well, who asked for that? And he was like, nobody, but you're gonna learn how to play this. And took us to the local park district, you know, in Austin, where I still remember my piano teacher to this day, Michael Meddy, who taught us the wonders and joys of what it is to play piano. And he stayed on our butts too. And then also that then moving me into more music, playing the trumpet for 4 or 5 years, you know, while I was in high school, still owning my trumpet to this day. But I credit, but again, so many activities that our parents introduced us to as a way to sort of stave off saying, you know, going into the local neighborhood and doing what the other kids do is not the only option available to you. We're going to curate a wholesome, healthy, good things for you to do that are going to expose you to the world in the right way.
Where'd you go to high school?
Providence St. Mel, which I think that's Garfield Park technically. Okay. I could be wrong though, but yeah, I went there for most of my high school career, and then junior year I left. Junior year was a tumultuous time. That's when my parents separated. And I was 14 at the time when the separation happened. I think, you know, it was at that time that I was coming into my own as a young man, my own identity. And also I looked like my father, I talked like my father. And, you know, for anyone who's been through a divorce, you understand that that can sometimes in and of itself prick one of your parents, right? And I think that as I was sort of going through this
You're a walking, living,
breathing image of my father. And so I think it was at a time where I was angry. I was really angry. Who were you angry at? You know, at the time, I couldn't make sense of my anger. I really couldn't. I didn't have the words. I surely didn't have the point of view. It wasn't until I got much older and sought counseling, therapy for myself that I could then reach back and contextualize all the things that had happened, how it made me feel. But also, I had, as I got older, achieved a lot more grace for my parents. And rather than sort of seeing them historically as I had, as two people who were doing this to me, doing this to each other, I started to understand their own backstories and how it led them to the inevitable fate that they had. And so, but I think at the time, all I understood was that my family was breaking apart. What I knew to be sort of the consistent, the anchor in my life, just wasn't there anymore.
That they actively and intentionally created for you?
No. You know, I think you do what you know, right? And I think in one regard, my mother was sort of reeling from the fact that this marriage that she had invested so much in was just falling apart, and there was frankly nothing she could do about it, and she was hurt. And I think my father's approach was more so of saying, let's just sort of move past it as soon as possible, try to repair it, right? And then let's sort of kind of get on with our lives. Neither approach was good for anyone involved.
Where did you attend college?
I went to college, DePaul University is sort of what my degree says, but I actually got accepted to a small liberal arts college in Lake Forest called Barra College. I got accepted to the acting program. I did enough of what I needed to do in terms of academics. The stage was everything to me. I found out sort of late in my life that I had a latent talent for the stage. And it's interesting because when you ask me the question about relationships and, you know, the history of my parents and their divorce, so much of what I was not able to articulate for myself and learn for myself what to do with that anger, I channeled it through the arts, through the stage. And so growing up as a shy kid who didn't talk very much, the theater became my outlet to sort of almost maybe put on the mask. And then, you know, effectively, I could be who and what I wanted to be without actually having to be me. And so I think that sort of moved me through grade school, then to high school, where I just happened to have an arts teacher, a theater teacher, who he and his wife, Dave and Donna Barnes, who live and breathe the theater, you know, taught, you know, local theater. They led the local theater program at Oswego High School. And they said, hey, we really think that you got something. And I was like, you know, yeah, whatever, right? And so they were like, no, you know, you should really come downstate to this this competition and just sort of, you know, do a monologue for college and universities that are giving out scholarship money for youth for their respective programs. Long story short, I did a monologue from Fences for 2 minutes. I got a number of callbacks, and ultimately I settled on going to Barra College, who offered me virtually almost a full scholarship, you know, to come to their theater conservatory.
And you graduated with a degree in?
Bachelor of Arts, okay, with a minor in business.
Okay. And your first paid job post-college was?
I went to go work for my corporate internship partner. Verizon Wireless was my corporate internship partner.
Do you know the question that I'm asking? Yeah, okay. Where did you make the decision
to sort of veer off from arts and?
Well, yes.
You know,
What was it? Strategic? Was it fear of the unknown?
Yeah, I think it was more so probably fear, maybe somewhat strategic, but I think the fear led first. I think we all come into an orientation about money from our parents, right? And you know, there's a variety of reasons for, you know, why my parents' marriage didn't work out long term, but I certainly knew as a child that money was an issue, right? And the pressure of putting 3 kids in private school for all of their lives, you know, trying to pay the mortgage, keep food on the table, you know, ebbs and flows in the market that, you know, may have incited layoffs here or there. And so for me, as I was poised to, you know, become a young man who had to be responsible for himself, I started doing the math and saying, hey, listen, how am I gonna?
The math ain't math.
Because many of my peers are talking about going to the East Coast, the West Coast, to, you know, do theater, or they were gonna go to LA or to New York and do film, and all of that was great. But everybody was prepared for the idea that we were just gonna make it work, and we were gonna starve, up until the time that it started coming together, and that was just not attractive to me. And it's so funny now because I think we live in a time where, with technology and YouTube and social media, I mean, effectively you have more means than you have today to just decide that you can really create your own story, and you can tell your own story and get it out there and sort of create your own audience for yourself. At the time, that was less of a thing when I was coming out of undergrad. So I made a calculated decision and said, what am I really passionate about? And how can I make money doing it? And for me, I always knew I wanted to go into business. I knew I did. I had saw so much divestment in my neighborhood of Austin growing up. I mean, you could literally go down whole streets and you could see evidence of the lack of investment or divestment. Businesses that have been closed for a long time, businesses that were struggling, to really deliver a great product or service. And to me, I lived next door to Oak Park, where it was a thriving community. Obviously, a lot bigger tax base, property tax base than Austin, but you could see businesses thriving, you could see community thriving. And to me, at a young age, I could very easily put it together to say, why is this like that? And this is how it looks on my side of the tracks, right? And I just realized for me that if I wanted to make a difference for people who looked like me and my community, then I thought that I could do, that acting wasn't going to do that for me. It was going to be business, and it was going to be learning the language of business and how to do business. That would in turn not only give opportunity for me, but give opportunity to other people.
And it's interesting, as I'm about to draw another red line, I listen to you and I think about so many folks who look like us don't have the luxury of not having to move with a sense of urgency. So as we're making decisions, it is always weighted with that sense of urgency. So I'm seeing the line, but help me fill it in. You found your way to West Monroe Partners.
Yeah.
What brought you there and what keeps you there now?
Oh man, are they sponsoring this segment right now?
You know what, listen, no, but
that's perfectly served up.
Well, your answers are filling in the blanks, sir.
So, it's funny, I didn't know what consulting was when I was young, when I was in high school, freshman, sophomore, but I just knew I wanted to do it. And I remember, I can't remember what class it was, but I remember being in the computer lab and sort of running through this diagnostic to help you figure out, what your career should be based on a series of questions that this program was asking me around. What are you good at? What do you like? Et cetera, et cetera. Spit out the results, and consultant was sort of at the top of the list, right? And I remember going home and telling my dad, who at the time was working for a major company. He was in IT, and I said, "Hey, Dad, I want to be a consultant." And he was not thrilled about that at all.
No. Huh.
And to this day, I don't necessarily remember why or know why, but I know that he wasn't a big fan of that, and why he particularly didn't think that had any value. But nonetheless, I ended up coming out of undergrad, going to work for my corporate intern partner, and then sort of making my way through industry, knowing all the while in the back of my head, I at some point wanted to make my foray into management consulting. And my father did everything that he could to let me know that the world was just so much bigger than that, right?
He did that he and your mom did that by design from the beginning.
Yeah. But my father wasn't really insistent about it. My mother was always about saying, get good grades, apply yourself, do your homework.
Yes.
Right?
Okay. Right.
Dad was like, hey.
He went deeper.
Yeah. He was pushing to say, take the risk, go across the world, see what's there, right? While you can, while you have all of your youth and your strength about you, right? That there's just so much waiting for you. He knew that intuitively, right? So I ended up at some point deciding that I was gonna go into management consulting. And, it's funny how God works because, sometimes God doesn't necessarily pull you back, but he says, you decided this path, so I'm gonna let you do that. And then once you exhaust yourself, then I'll step in. And that's kind of what I did. I went through the whole motions of applying, to, Stanford, Harvard, after doing the GMAT and all this other stuff. And then wouldn't you know that, like, 2 or 3 weeks after my formal submission, I then have a chance meeting with someone who happens to work at the firm, West Monroe. And I didn't meet with them for an interview. I met with them just to talk through a specific challenge or problem that I was having, and another person told me, you should go talk with this person. And when I talked with them and just sort of told them about the work that I was doing, the consulting work I was doing in the tech space, they said, hey, I really like the work that you're doing, and I think that there's a place for you here. I don't know if you're interested, but if you are, let me know and let's talk more about that. And I remember going home and then sort of digging deep and doing my research about what this firm was and what was the work that they did. And I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't know that they existed, right? And then more importantly, the work that they were doing was the work that I wanted to do. It wasn't just about technology per se, but it was about really helping businesses to solve problems by virtue of leveraging technology. And so I called, who's now my good friend at the firm, Ken. I called Ken up and I said, hey, Ken, I said, I want to take you up on that offer. And I think that I want to formally apply to the firm. And I want to talk with you a little bit more about the organizational culture, what are the opportunities available to me, and the specific work that I think that I want to do there. I effectively moved away from the entire idea of going and spending perhaps what was going to be, $250,000 on an MBA education, only to just sort of fast track to immediately doing the thing that I wanted to do, and then being able to get paid for it. And subsequent to making that move 8.5 years ago, I've been promoted twice. I've traveled extensively. I've done an extraordinary amount of great work. Even more recently, spending the last 17 months in Puerto Rico rebuilding the energy grid, which has been extraordinary work, exhausting work, but extraordinary work. So I'm happy, and I know for a fact that in as much as me leaving Chicago and going into the theater conservatory and me going into management consulting, I know I can look at those two inflection points in my life and know without a doubt that it wasn't me, that was orchestrated divinely, and the path was set up for me to make that segue into those areas.
Okay, right there, the doors of the church are open. Speaking of divine order, thank you. Wow. You and I are going to continue our conversation on the other side of the break. We're going to start with our final segment called Three Questions With.
Got it.
3 questions, 3 for the road. What is happening to me today? 3 questions for the road. Thank you, Tasha. So let's go ahead and do that. You stay with us. Thank you, sir. And thank you, Chicago, as well. Stay with us. We'll be back on the other side of the break. Clarence Booth, we are at the stage of the show where we launch a segment called 3 for the Road. I'm going to ask you 3 questions.
Okay.
You're going to give me 3 answers.
All right.
Ready?
I'm ready.
All right, first question. If you could have dinner with any person, living or deceased, who would you choose and why?
I'm going to say the first thing that comes to my brain, Sam Greenlee. He was a Chicago native. He authored Spook Was Set by the Door.
Ooh. Great book, great answer. Question 2, do you have any regrets?
I used to. I don't anymore. I realize that's a ball and chain.
Wow. 2 for 2. Final question. One piece of advice present-day Clarence would have given his 18-year-old self.
Learn how to love yourself more and be forgiving for the things that you didn't know.
Did you hear our floor director just now? You know it's good when the floor director, Tasha
Did I hit the mark,
Hawkins,
Tasha?
go, my. Okay, I want to do a few two questions I didn't get to in our previous segment. Who is Hope Alexandria?
Oh man, my gift from God. It's my daughter. She is now 19. She's now enjoying her second semester in college down in Atlanta. My father told me that the biggest thing that he ever hoped for in his life was that I would go on to do things that he could never do. When I look at my daughter, and that is true. I have done that, and I will continue to do more of that. But when I look at my daughter, she's going to shorten that leap so much. I mean, where she is now in terms of her sense of self, the curiosity that she has in terms of wanting to be in the world and find her place in it, the impact that she wants to make, all the existential questions that I still ask myself. She started asking herself those questions in single digits. And so she is going to leapfrog me by leaps and bounds if she isn't poised to do so probably within the next 2 or 3 years. And she's just so fearless. And it has been interesting to, watch this flower bloom.
I am so appreciative of this is the 50th episode of In the Arena. And it never ceases to amaze me each time we sit with someone well-known and well worth knowing. The things that you think you know, the opportunity, the privilege of seeing someone's humanity and to be able to close your eyes and almost visualize from the first question, you start to see who they are. In a way that is more than just a title on paper, but it's the song beneath the music. And my God, if it didn't happen again today, sir. Clarence, and I'm so glad that our paths are crossed. I'm excited about getting to know you and the things that we would do and the talent that you bring, the skill set.
Thank you.
That you bring to communities that, and by design and intentionality, communities that need it most, to have a you in the boardroom or in the executive teams to help with this planning and guiding and strategy and pulling it together for scale and sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darius.
And thank you, Chicago and beyond, for tuning in. Let me leave you with a final thought for the road, courtesy of British author Ken Robinson. What you do for yourself dies when you leave this world. What you do for others lives on forever. Until next time, take good care of you and each other. Good night.